Good morning. This is Debra V. Wilson. It is Wednesday, the 13th of January, 2021, and the time is 22 minutes after midnight, and that's GMT. So, this is one of my stream of consciousness, and so I'm going to go through this very slowly. I recently saw an article entitled Online Extremism Cannot Be Policed, quote unquote, Florence Basu. The date is the 8th of January 2021, and it was in counterterrorism business. Neil Basu, the head of counterterrorism policing, has warned that extremism has become so widespread online that it cannot be policed. Again, quote unquote. So what I will do is include a link to the article in the description box of the podcast. So I'm trying to take things in pieces. And this is my work, my research. And in my research, there are three countries that I look at. Their national security model. In alpha order, that's Canada, Israel, and the UK. My focus of late has been the United Kingdom, and I look at the internal national security model. In any of the countries that I look at, I'm looking at the internal national security model, and this country is led by SO15, that's the counterterrorism police, and MI5, that's the internal spying agency. So I look at SO15 as an intelligence, piece of the intelligence model. And so therefore, an intelligence apparatus, but SO15 is out of the Metropolitan Police, and that's a policing force. So just so that's clear. So I'm asking these questions in a podcast that I really don't have the answers to, but it's what I'm trying to focus on. So this podcast is very, very brief. The title of it is I am seeking to understand the weaponization of an identity. And is the weaponization of an identity the foundation of extremism? So I start with the premise that we are each a myriad of intersecting identities. I also argue we, in varying degrees, are able to decide how we choose to express and live those intersecting identities. Then I ask, do people experience their intersecting identities in a hierarchical order? So, for example, for me, like everybody else, I have a myriad of identities, but my primary one is I'm a Black person who's the descendant of slaves. So that's significant for me. I also ask, what is the process when a person decides, quote unquote, to radicalize an identity? I'm sorry, I do apologize, weaponize. I don't like the term radicalize. I question what that means, and I think it's more appropriate. That's ironic that I said radicalize when I actually have weaponized written down. I think it's more important to say it's weaponized as opposed to radicalized. Then I go on to ask, is the primary, quote unquote, identity, is it the primary identity that is weaponized, or by default does the weaponized identity become the primary identity? And is the weaponization of an identity extremism? For example, just to give you an example, gender. If you weaponize your gender, misogynism, right? If you weaponize your ethnicity, racism. If you weaponize your nationality, wherever you're born, that is, for instance, problems with people who lawfully, foreign nationals who lawfully emigrate or lawfully seek asylum. You don't believe they belong because they are not. That they don't share the same birth nationality. Orientation, hate crimes that are against the LGBT plus community because you're heterosexual and that's the only correct identity. People think a lot of things. You can be homophobic but not act out on that homophobia. But when you do act out on that homophobia, I argue you have weaponized your heterosexuality, your physicality. Hate crimes against people who, for instance, need wheelchairs. You weaponize your ableism. They are less than because they need a wheelchair. Religiosity. If you construct your religion in a way that acts out, the performance of the religiosity is violent. I would say you weaponize your religion. It goes on and on and on and on. And then, so I said this was a work in progress, and it's after midnight. It's a stream of consciousness because one of the things that I find problematic are the terms that are used in counterterrorism and counter-extremism, and I think there are more appropriate terms that better reflect what's happening. And so radicalize, first of all, radical is objective. And you can be a radical feminist and not be violent. You could be a radical any religion and not be violent or harmful or think of less of others. You could be a radical vegan. But I think the whole point of extremism is the particular identity you weaponize. It is to harm others in some other way. That is the whole point of this identity being weaponized. It's out of that particular identity you feel empowered, the right, the belief that you can hurt others because you are this particular identity and they are not. This is Debra V. Wilson. It's a bit of a ramble, but it's like I said, it's a work in progress, and this was a stream of consciousness. And remember, it's just after midnight. Thank you very much for listening.